is an oral history interview conducted for the Witness to War Serving a Nation project at Nauset Regional High School on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. For the sake of this interview, please state your full name and the community which you reside in now.
My name is Ripa. I live in Chatham, Massachusetts.
Okay. How did you end up on Cape Cod?
I was born here.
How did you end up in the military?
When I was 23, I was working in Harwich, and I was getting kind of bored of everything I had going on, and I was not very appreciative of what I had, so I decided to join the Army National Guard. It was also the same time the Boston Marathon bombings happened, which kind of inspired me I felt like I had to do something rather than nothing.
How did your parents react for you joining the military?
They were both pretty excited. I think my mom was a little kind of nervous and all that, but she was also excited that she was supportive of my choice and all that.
What age did you join the military?
I was 23.
Was anyone in your family in the military before you?
I think my grandfather was, but I don't really know for sure.
What was the last thing you did before you left for service?
That's a fun question. My nephew came over to my house, and we hung out for a bit. He was only 3 or 4 at the time, and then we all got together at my mom's house the night before. Yeah.
As a child, what was your understanding of war?
I guess I obviously didn't really understand the seriousness of it, but I have 3 older brothers, and we always used to play war and pretend guns and stuff, all that outside. So probably a fun thing, maybe.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
I used to want to be a pilot.
Cool. What was your childhood like?
I'd say pretty average. Cape Cod. Both my parents were working. Yeah, pretty standard stuff.
Why did you pick the Army National Guard?
I picked the Army National Guard. Let's see. I really liked living on Cape and all that, and I didn't want to move away, so I didn't do full time. And I wanted to join more for the community rather than actual military, so that's why I joined the National Guard, because it allowed me to get away and train for a while and all that, but then come back home and still remain, as part of the military, but also be able to live my own normal life at the same time.
Yeah, that's very important.
For sure.
Describe a typical day in the military.
My initial training, basic, and what they call AIT, which is Advanced Individual Training, was it was a little chaotic. The day started very early and they were very long. We usually up around 4 or so, and then doing PT and running and all that stuff, and then depending on the training for the day, whether we were shooting or whatever drills we were learning and all that. So that was all basic in AIT, and then after that I was just doing 1 or 2 weekends a month, and then for that I was doing more of my job, which was working on satellite communications and all that. So we would just go out into the woods and stuff and set up camps and train on that.
What was it like to work with satellites?
It was pretty cool. At first it was a lot to learn. It was kind of intimidating because there's all computers, and setting up everything had to be perfect. But once you got it down, it was just kind of tinkering on the computer and talking to people on the phone. So not as cool as it sounds.
What was the food like that you ate?
Not great. It was all right. You got used to it, but one thing they have is what's called an MRE, which is a meal ready to eat, and it's just a bunch of different things that are sealed. It's not awful, but you get used to eating cold meatballs in the dark and stuff like that.
Would you say school lunches are better?
Yeah.
Describe your most thrilling experience in the military.
People think I'm crazy for it, but I was in training in Louisiana for 3 weeks with it's called JRTC, which is Joint Readiness Training Program, or camp or whatever. So we were in Louisiana for, I think it was 23 days, but then for 11 of those days, it was like a pretend deployment. So we were just in the woods, like just like camping basically, but with no electricity or running water and all that. That was I had a lot of fun, and I had never been to Louisiana before, and it was hot and nasty, and I just really enjoyed the whole experience.
That's good. Who was in charge of your group or platoon?
There's kind of a few people, but one guy above me, he's done a couple deployments, and he was initially a sergeant first class, but he became a master sergeant. But he was my section chief. He would be considered. He didn't have the same job as me. He had a very similar job, so I learned a lot from him. Yeah.
What places did you go, and what were they like?
I talked about I went to Fort Polk, Louisiana. I was in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, which was my basic training. That was like chaotic because that was like when I first started everything. I went September. I was there September to November, I think. So that was all like there was a lot, long days and all that. And then from there I went to Fort Gordon, Georgia. I was there for about 6 months. That was more of a relaxed atmosphere. We still did PT early in the morning, but then it was a lot of class work, much like a college campus almost. That's where I learned my job with the satellites and all that. And then when I left there, I came back home for a couple weeks, and that's when I started drilling. And I would go to either Brockton, which is where my unit was based out of, and then from there we would go a lot of Fort Jericho, Vermont. We went to Fort Polk, a couple other places around the Cape, some on the Cape, Otis Air Force Base. We went there a bit. So yeah, a few places.
Sounds like you've been a lot.
Yeah, we went around.
What kind of friendships did you develop in the military?
Initially, I had made some very good friends, and we all stayed in touch. We all moved away. Some of my friends went to Hawaii, Japan, and then a lot of people stayed in the States, and we all stayed very close for a while. But now I actually only really talk to one person occasionally, which I thought it was going to be much different than that, but we all kind of just drifted apart.
What was going through your mind when you first said that you were going to join the military?
I was pretty excited to shake things up, because I had kind of I call it plateaued. I was just kind of bored. So I was mostly excited just to get out of here and go do some interesting things.
What were your living conditions like?
They were all different. When I was at basic, it was there was 54 of us on one floor, just bunk beds and lockers. From there, it was 12-man rooms, similar setup as before, just smaller. And then a lot of the training after that, it was just intense on cots and sleeping bags and stuff like that. So
doesn't sound comfortable.
It wasn't terrible. You're so tired that anything's comfortable.
What was it like living so far from home?
I really didn't. Aside from South Carolina and Georgia, I mostly lived here, but I liked it. I liked being away for the time I spent away. Yeah.
Get some freedom.
Yeah, some freedom and someplace new was exciting.
What was boot camp like for you?
It was at first. It was seemed daunting. It was really tiring the first couple of weeks because it's such long days, 6-7 days a week. But I got over that pretty quickly, and I started really liking it. And I just took it one day at a time, one step at a time. I'd always tell myself just to keep myself in the right mindset. So I was able to actually have a really good time with it, whereas some other people were struggling with it. So I kind of liked it.
That's good. What did you miss most about when you were serving?
It was very easy. All you had to do was exactly what you were told, because there was always somebody else that was higher up. So, now, being a manager before, and I'm now learning a new job, but I'm responsible for a lot. But back then, I was only an E4, so I wasn't super high up. And all you had to really do was just exactly what you were told, and it was very easy to live that way. So that was probably what I missed the most.
How long did you go without talking with your family?
The longest I went was like 11 weeks. I mean, we wrote letters occasionally, but they would take a long time to receive and send the letters, so I would call it, technically 11 weeks without really talking.
That's kind of sad.
Yeah, but it was okay.
What were you allowed to pack going place to place?
Not a lot. Mostly just stuff that we would need when I was at basic. We didn't we'd bring our cell phones, but they locked all our personal stuff up for that. And then for AIT, we got a couple things here and there, but really minimal. Yeah, not a lot of pictures and stuff like that too, but
You didn't have to carry a lot of luggage.
yeah, right.
What was the hardest decision you had to make?
It was difficult when I decided to not re-enlist, not to continue my contract. That was a tough choice because I really did want to stay, but at the same time it was starting to take more of a negative toll on my life than I was getting out of it, so that was a tough choice.
How is military life different from civilian life?
It's very structured. Nobody's ever really nice to you. You don't get you have to get used to being wrong and being I call it resilient. It's just not letting things bother you. But here, I mean, outside of that, it's very easygoing. But yeah, it's a bit different.
What did you miss most about civilian life when you were serving?
The freedom of being able to do. It's just, I contradict myself almost because the things I did like about it, I also like the opposite of. But even being able to sleep in and not having to always answer to somebody, probably be what I miss the most.
Yeah, I would miss that too. What was the most dangerous or challenge aspect of your occupation in the military?
The Louisiana training I talked about was pretty bad. There was quite a few people had to get airlifted out because of the conditions we were under and the long days and the heat and a lot of stuff like that. So that was probably one of the tougher ones.
Were the mosquitoes bothering you?
The mosquitoes, actually, it was funny. They weren't bad at all, and you'd think they were, but it was actually dragonflies all over the place, and I guess they eat the mosquitoes all the time, which was funny. But yeah, I would have thought everybody thought that too, but they weren't bad at all.
What did you do in your free time?
Now or then?
Then.
Then, my group of friends, we would go bowling a lot. There was a bowling alley on base, so we would go bowling. It was odd the things we found entertaining at that point, but we'd all just kind of hang out and just, I don't know, run around like a child.
Well, you were kids. I mean...
Yeah, true.
What did you think about your higher authorities?
Some of them I liked, but a lot of them I did not like, especially when I was doing just drill weekends rather than full-time, because at my job I was in charge of a lot of people and a lot of responsibility, and then I had to go there, and people that I would see as not competent would be in charge of me and telling me what to do, when in reality they were wrong, but because of the structure of rank and all that, you're not allowed to do anything, and you have to let them be wrong. So some of them were good, like my closest ones I really liked, but then some other people I didn't care too much for. But you're not really allowed to
say anything.
Do or say anything, yeah.
Was there any particular person that you had a strong bond with?
Yeah, the one person I talk to now, he and I became very close. He had done a couple deployments as well, so he was really hard. He didn't really get along with anybody, but I liked how mean and upset he was, and I think he was trying to deter me, but I really liked him, and we became very close.
That's good.
Yeah.
What was the most interesting place that you served?
I keep going back to Louisiana. I think that was a trip. We went there. Another time I went to we did cold weather training, which was we went up a mountain in Vermont, and we were in the woods in February for 10 days, just intense. That was a trip because it was very cold. So that was another interesting one we did.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Would not want to do it. What was your favorite aspect of your job?
It was cool. It's cool to say. I was working on satellites, communications, and all that. It was a difficult job to get. I had to get a security clearance, and I tested very well in the ASVAB. So having that more difficult job, I think was pretty cool.
What was the least favorite aspect?
It was after we'd get set up. It was very, very boring. Just sitting for 18 hours at a time, waiting for something to break or something to go wrong. It would get very boring.
Yeah. What was your biggest health scare, if you had one?
Let's see. They need to clear you before you can leave training. So after my training in Georgia, I was what was called flagged, and they wanted me to have surgery on my face, but it was minor and it wound up being nothing. But it was actually going to make me stay there for another few months.
Ooh.
So I didn't want to do that. So I actually lied on a couple forms so that I could leave. But I had to do a bunch of training with stitches and gauze in my mouth and trying to hide it. But other than that, nothing really. A couple times with heights and stuff like that, I have a really hard time with, and we're forced to do a lot of stuff like that. Confidence courses, they call them. So some of that was, but never a real health issue, no.
My brother got a stress fracture.
Oh, good.
He had to stay behind for 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. That's what mine was going to be. It was going to be a couple months, and I wasn't having it. So.
Yeah. What was your proudest moment?
I didn't care. I don't care too much about myself, but my mom came down to see me graduate, and she was very happy and excited and all that. So probably then, just for her.
As every mom would be. What was your overall experience in the military?
Overall, I'd say it was very positive. I learned a lot, and it was just a good experience to be able to say I did and all that.
What were your responsibilities as satellite person?
Basically, what I would do is I'd go in and we'd have this trailer. So we'd go in a new area and I'd set up the trailer and the satellite and all that, and then we'd have to get communications going, and then I worked with another team of people, and we had to work together to just set up communications, basically get internet going for whatever base we were in, just so everybody could communicate with people far away. So setting that up and then maintaining it and making sure that everything was always in running order.
That's good.
Yeah.
How did the military change your life?
What I said earlier was, mental resilience. It really instilled a serious can-do attitude for me, because there's a lot of times where, being so tired and having such long days and having still so much more to do before you're allowed to take a break, you need to be it's all mental. Your body will let you keep going for as long as you push it too. So that was the biggest thing, because I use that all the time now. Just knowing that when you do want to give up, you can push yourself way further than you'd ever imagine. So that was probably one of my biggest gains from it.
Yeah. I think that's with everyone. They don't realize that.
Yeah, for sure.
If you could go back and redo it, what would you do again?
If I could do it,
if
I could redo, I would go right out of high school. I would go when I was 18, and I would do full time. I wouldn't have done National Guard or anything like that. I would do a whole contract for the entire time, because I do kind of regret not ever being deployed and all that. I don't want to do it now, but I think that it would have been good to have done right out of high school instead.
How did your time away from home affect your personal relationships?
It really didn't too bad. I wasn't gone for a lot of the other people. They go away for a lot longer. They move permanently and all that, which I was fortunate enough to not have to do. But it really didn't affect too much personal for me anyway. I know a lot of people it does, but it wasn't for me.
If you got to go back, what military branch would you choose?
I would it's kind of a tough choice. I would probably do Army again, but I mean, everybody says the Air Force is easy and a lot nicer and all that, so that's a compelling argument as well.
Mm.
But I gotta stick to Army probably because that's what I did, right?
Yeah. What experiences from service affects you most today?
There's really not too much of an impact still. I mean, nothing negative. Definitely positives, like I said, the mental resilience and all that. I actually very rarely do I ever even talk about it because I think people think weird stuff or they want to know, personal stuff. I just very rarely talk about it. I don't think it's, changed that part of things too much.
Yeah. If you didn't go into the service, what profession would you have gone for?
Before I went in, I was an apprentice electrician, and it was almost like I didn't like doing that. I had done it for 4.5 years. I probably would have wound up staying and doing that, and then not liked it.
Okay.
So that's kind of why I wanted like an out too.
What word best describes your service?
That's kind of a tough one. I don't know. Interesting, I guess.
It's a good one. How did you feel when you returned home?
It was nice to come back. Actually, in between trainings, I got to come back for a few days. It was right before Christmas, so they give you a few days to come home. But it was cool, seeing everybody and
Sleeping in.
Sleeping in, yeah. It was like even the first time, like out of basic, going to a store for the first time was weird. You wouldn't think so, but
yeah.
But yeah, it was nice to come back and just hang out and relax for a couple of days.
If one of your relatives came to you and said they wanted to go into the military, what advice would you give them?
I would make sure, I would tell them some things. I did a couple of interviews with some other people afterwards, and a lot of stuff I read online. There's a lot of things you don't think about. You get excited. If you want to go, you look at only the positives without looking at the whole picture. So I would give them an honest opinion on, the whole picture of what you're really doing, because they're going to go to a recruiter. The recruiter's going to tell them what seems nice, but may not necessarily be 100% accurate. So I'd not deter them from it, but just give them an honest view on it.
Yeah, that seems best.
Yeah.
What struggles did you face adjusting to civilian life again?
It really wasn't too bad. I was, stuck waking up super early, but it's not even trouble. I wouldn't say really any troubles because I didn't deploy or anything like that. So.
What is your view on war after your time served?
I think it's. I don't know. That's difficult. It's I wish that I could have gone to experience one as myself. Wish I could have been. I was during a wartime, but we never got deployed. I think it changes people a lot, but I think sometimes it's also necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say necessary, but.
What was one thing you took away from your service?
Again, the positive was mental resilience and just like the can-do attitude.
Yeah. How do you feel about movies made about military branches and boot camp and everything?
I think some of them are good, and then also a lot of it's dramatized, and then I think even some of it could paint a bad picture. If somebody already had a bias and then there was a negative in a movie, they're going to latch onto that when in reality it's probably not even that true. But then on the opposite end of that, some stuff's glorified that I don't think should be, and that might give somebody the wrong idea to be pro. Some of them, most of them I'd say, I'm not too much for because they give, the wrong impression, either positive or negative.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, but they, Hollywood, it's everything's kind of glorified.
How did the difference in climate affect you?
That was like a tougher part, you know, because we, like I said, we did the cold weather training, and it was whatever 10, 11 days. It was in absolute freezing cold. At noon, it would be 10, 15 degrees below zero, and we were outside. That was it was cold, and I like to think that it makes me like every time I'm cold now, I'm like, well, I've been way worse. So I'd say for a positive. And then again, Louisiana was hot, hot, hot. But I loved the heat, so that wasn't a problem. But.
Yeah, and the KMUs aren't warm and they're not cold.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but yeah, so it made me more appreciative. If I'm cold and wet now, I know it's been worse. So.
Yeah, that's true. What was the longest time you went without coming home?
It was, I think it was just under 6 months. Yeah.
How did you feel when you first got to boot camp? You said that you were tired a lot.
Yeah, first getting there, it's called reception, and it was kind of terrible because it was unorganized, and everybody's everywhere, and you have to go to all these different places and get all this different paperwork. The problem with that is like you're getting transferred to different groups all the time. So, you've been up for 12 hours doing paperwork and getting shots and getting physicals and getting your uniforms, and then you have to go to a different group to get more equipment, but the person running that group doesn't know you haven't slept for 12 hours, and they put you on for another 10 hours of doing more stuff. And it's just like, so first getting there was pretty brutal. It's called reception. Everybody knows it's awful. But then once getting to like actual basic, where with my drill sergeants and my actual platoon and all that, getting off of the bus, because you hadn't slept for there's been like a week where maybe you've slept like 1 or 2 hours per night. It's like different for each group, I guess, but mine was pretty bad. And you get on this bus, and it's the first time you've really sat down and relaxed in a week. And it's warm and it's quiet, and they're driving, and every single person fell asleep, not exaggerating, within seconds. And then we're woken up. For me, it seemed like days later, but I guess it had only been a couple minutes, to us being screamed at and thrown off the bus, and then sprinting across this dirt field carrying whatever duffel bag we had, and it was just absolute chaos. But I loved every second of it. It was exciting, and it was crazy. Everybody was like crying and falling down and stuff. I was kind of enjoying it. So yeah, it was that was the first day. They call that day zero because it's like the start of. So then it was immediate, team building exercises, and they made us. It was like 300 of us. They piled all of our duffel bags in a giant pile, and we had 5 minutes to go find our duffel bag. It might have even been less than that. And if we didn't find it, we had to start all over. And they just did that over and over and over and running. And it was just, they wanted us to figure out how to work together right off the bat, basically. And then once we all started to click, we all got like a system going. And that was really cool to see like how quickly we all became friends and close, just out of necessity, pretty much.
Were you ever scared in boot camp?
Not like for my life or anything. They get in your face and yell, but that didn't really faze me. Like I said, the heights issue was what I had a hard time with. But you have to do it. You just get over it. A couple times being woken up in the middle of the night, like screaming, but like obviously not like actually scared. It's startling. But no, never like scared.
Yeah, my uncle remembers like they would wake you up in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Get you up.
Yeah, and like you're never really sure. I always used to think it was like time to be up, but then it's really like 2 a.m, and we go outside and run around in circles and then come back inside and go to sleep. But it was. People think I'm crazy, but like I liked all that stuff. I thought it was cool and all that. It made me appreciate being back here too.
Yeah.
I try to take positives out of all situations like that.
When you first got screamed at, were you shocked?
No, I it didn't bother me.
Said a lot of people were crying.
Yeah, I think the reason for me was I was a lot older. Everybody else was like, a lot of them were fresh out of high school and all that, and I wasn't. And
you knew hard work.
yeah, for sure. And fortunately, I had actually, before I went to basic, I was at Camp Edwards, Otis Air Force Base, and I had done drills there, and they were actually way worse there than basic ever was. So I got the worst of it, like my first couple weeks. So I had that going for me too.
Are there any funny stories that you have from boot camp?
Yeah, there's a lot of funny stories, like the games that they'll play with you, and it was funny because I used to not really like my drill sergeants and all that, because I just thought they were just mean, and then growing closer with them as I went on, I got put in charge of my whole platoon for a while, and because of that, I would go away from the group and be with the drill sergeant. I realized that they're actually hilarious, and the things they were doing are really funny.
Yeah.
And we all had lockers, and we were supposed to lock your locker all the time. And one time they went up into our rooms when we were all down, and they took every padlock and they locked them together. And it was just this big ball of padlocks. And they were like, you have 30 seconds to fix this. And they threw it out in the sands. So everybody went running out there to get it. And we all just started picking up the padlock and everybody was trying their own combination to get it unlocked. And there was probably 15 or 20 of them. And we had 30 seconds to do it, and then we come back, and it's called getting smoked, where it's you have to do push-ups or squats or something until failure, and you're exhausted. And then we all have to sprint back out to the ball of locks, and everybody's trying their own lock. And slowly, one after one, they started coming unlocked. But it was, I thought it was the funniest thing. I knew it wasn't my lock, so I didn't even try. But just we'd all get smoked. Everybody would get punished, and then the few people who thought maybe that was their locks would try it. And the system we worked out, where we would just hand it down the line, and everybody would just try until locks started coming off. So then we finally did that, and everybody had their locks. So we were told to go back up into our rooms, and whoever didn't have a lock on their locker to put their lock back. And they had every single bunk bed, every mattress, every sheet, every blanket, pillows, boots, shaving cream, coat hangers, everything was hanging from the ceiling. Shaving cream was everywhere, and we had to clean all that up, and we had a couple minutes to do that, and if we didn't do it, we had to come back down and get smoked again. It was just...
Yeah. My brother was you're you have 13 seconds to take off your belt. Once you
yeah, they count as fast as you can, yeah. Or we have to do push-ups for 5 seconds. 1, 2, it's, you can't tell them they're wrong. It's stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's funny.
That's good that you had some fun.
Yeah, I liked all that stuff. The parts I didn't like were just when it was very slow and
boring.
Yeah, trying to find stuff to do.
Yeah.
But that's when, you grow friendships and all that, so.
Yeah. Was there anyone in your platoon that you didn't like?
Yeah, there was quite a few. It was kids that I think they never really worked before and all that, and I think they felt almost entitled. They didn't want to clean up after themselves. Every one person gets in trouble, you're all getting in trouble. Just a not disciplined kids, I call them. But the ones that I would work with and changed, it was really cool and become friends with. And the ones that were just too stubborn, I didn't get along with.
Were you surprised when they graduated?
No, there's not really. It's very, very difficult to not graduate, because they're going to make sure that you do, because it's all contracted, so you have to finish. So It's either that or you stay back, and there's a couple that stayed back I wasn't surprised by, but they have to keep going until they pass everything.
Yeah.
It's not oh, you didn't make it, go home. That's not an option.
Yeah. You're
in it for your whole contract, which is anywhere between 3 and 8 years. It's not oh, you don't do well, you don't like it, you can go home. It's unless you break the law, but then you go to jail.
Yeah.
So. And
then you're never heard from again.
Yeah, something like that.
Were you the oldest one in your platoon?
I was not the oldest. There was a couple kids my age, and there was some that were a bit older, but I was one of the older ones, yeah.
That's good. Were you happy that you went to the Army National Guard, and not electrician? work?
Yeah, I was glad that I did that over. Yeah, it was just to get away from here and all that.
Yeah. Thank you for doing this with us today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for your service.
Yeah,
of course.
thanks for your support. I appreciate it.